welcome to the special edition of Wide Angle on the Wire.in's YouTube channel. We have with us today journalist and author Rahul Pandita, most recently in the news for being one of the writers for the movie Shikara. Rahul, thanks very much for being on this show. I didn't want to say more in the introduction because I'd like to ask you the reason with which you approached this movie. Shikara is supposed to be sort of the first telling of the story of Kashmiri Pandits who were forced to leave at the beginning of the conflict in 89-90 in mainstream Bollywood. Is that what it was intended to do?
My book, which is a memoir of what happened to the Kashmiri Pandits in the 1980s, came out in 2013. It is the first documentation of the KP tragedy as we knew it, as the community knew it. Around that time, me and Vinod Chopra started working on this story. So the brief of this story was clear from day one, that this is a love story which is set in the backdrop of what happened to Kashmiri Pandits in 89-90. So that is the brief we started working with. But somewhere down the line, we were also conscious of the fact that much water has flown down the Ganges, and there's a lot of hatred and bitterness revolving around it. Though I'm the last one to compromise on the truth of Kashmiri Pandits, but I was also aware of the fact that at least a film, we should create a film, and Vinod was with me on this, that it should be a film which should heal. Or at least there should be some sort of forward movement. So we have used that soft approach, the approach of love in this film, so that at least politically a conversation starts between the fault line.
You say that, I mean, some of the characters in the film, in fact, many of the characters in the film and the side stories and the details are based on your own memoir, Our Moon Has Blood Clots, right? And you didn't compromise on what your truth was when you wrote that book. Yet members of your own community today are attacking you for having compromised on the reality of the exodus and the hardship of what Kashmiri Pandits faced and the brutality of what they may have faced. In the movie, they said that, you know, it was intended to be something, but it's actually just Bollywood trying to make money off some soppy love story.
I think most Kashmiri Pandits who have actually gone and seen the film are really appreciative of what we have seen. We have had inputs from across India, wherever the Kashmiri Pandits are based, who have seen the film and they have left the cinema hall crying. In fact, we received many encouraging reports from Jammu, where a lot of Kashmiri Muslims who are based in Jammu right now because of winter, etc. A friend's father, parents went to see this film in Jammu, and he called me and he said he personally saw a few Kashmiri Muslims there in the cinema hall who were crying after watching this film. So I think personally for me that is a very big victory. But having said that, you know, there's a lot of bitterness among Kashmiri Pandit community. Many of those are getting confused about this. They have not seen the film. So I've been saying on various social media platforms that at least go and watch the film. Now there's also a certain expectation from the film because the community as a people has have gone through have seen a lot of violence in 89-90. So somewhere there was this expectation that there will be a reflection of that violence in this film. But we consciously wanted to avoid that violence. Though we are not, like I said, we are not compromised on the truth or the circumstances that, you know, it's a multi-layered film. We did not want to assign a particular face to the perpetrators of these crimes. You know, I mean, there's no Bitta Karate or Yasin Malik in this film. But there are enough villains in this film, people who failed us from the majority community. But there's also this overarching theme that, you know, which personally is a takeaway from my own people for this film, is that despite all odds, no matter what happened to us, we lost everything in 1990. But we did not become a violent people. We did not pick up arms. We did not burn buses. We held on to our dignity. We educated them ourselves. But the pain of losing our homeland is still in our hearts. And I think partially the bitterness is coming from that on social media. And of course there are trolls. Trolls are trolls, and there are trolls within my community also who want to militarize this. Who want to militarize this story. They want this film to add to the add further to the bitterness among Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Hindus. As a responsible person, as an artist, as far as this film is concerned, I was very clear that I wouldn't have allowed that.
Are you disappointed or hurt by the kind of abuse that's been hurled at you after the film's release?
I think some of it was expected. You see the circumstances. Suddenly a woman arises out of nowhere. There are more than 200 Kashmiri Pandits in a particular cinema hall where this movie is being screened. And after the movie is over and Vinod walks up to the aisle, they get up and, there's a standing ovation. People personally come to, I was not there, people personally come to Vidhu and they congratulate him for making this sensitive film. But suddenly, the mobile camera is on, the woman is there, and she starts screaming. What did she achieve from this? So even after she did this, Vinod was very respectful towards her. But at the same time, we appealed to everyone, not only from my community, but from from all over India, that please go and watch this film at least. We are not the ones who will not take positive criticism. Some people think that we have shown a watered down version of what happened to Kashmiri Pandits, and I think that could be a fair criticism. But to say today that, all kinds of metaphors at us, I'm the Jaichand of the community, or, we've sold our soul. I mean, this is not a money-making venture for at least with Vinod Chopra. I mean, he's the one who's made films like Three Idiots and Munna Bhai, films which get 15 crores, 20 crores on one day. So at least there was a certain clarity, that this is not a kind of film where you make crores. This is a film only told because we wanted to say the story, and we wanted to say the story in a particular way.
But I think that begs another question, the kind of expectations that were laid on the film to tell an accurate detailing of the historical events of the years in the run-up to the Exodus in January 1990. This is not a documentary. I mean, it is fiction. It may be taking from reality, it may be taking from the characters who you grew up with and their stories. But ultimately, it's a work of fiction. And does fiction have a role in just generally educating? I mean, this is not a film for the Kashmiri Pandit community. This is a film that's meant to be for a larger national community that may or may not be aware, and we'll come to that later as well, about what happened in that time, for whatever reasons. Why is this burden being placed on a work of fiction?
We have made this very clear from day one that this film is not an adaptation of my book. The book is a documentation of, I mean, it's a complete documentation of what happened. But this is just a, we have picked a few strands, common strands from the book. But the story,
and some characters.
Some characters here and there. We have coupled some characters. Like, for example, Naveen's character, his personality is based on my own brother who got killed in that conflict. But his story is that of Naveen Sapru, the young telecommunication engineer who gets killed, just like Naveen does in the film. But it's a film. It's not a documentary, like you said, Maya, right? So it is meant to go out. It's a commercial film, and Vidhu keeps on quoting Ingmar Bergman, who said that thou shall entertain, and thou shall entertain without selling your soul. So we have not sold our souls, but this story is meant for entertainment in a country where people do not want to watch sad stories at all. So this is a mainstream film, and through this we have tried to convey one strand of the Kashmiri Pandit stories in the hope that others will come and tell more stories, because for 30 years there have been many films on Kashmir, as you know. There's Roja, there are other films, but nobody has touched upon the aspect of the Kashmiri Pandit story of it. There are multiple stories in Kashmir. That is one. The other thing is that, many people are now saying on Facebook, that, you know, this is not Schindler's, this is not Schindler's List. There's an irony there, because most of these people who are saying, you know, it's not a Schindler's List, they are also saying that their favorite film director is Vivek Agnihotri. So, you know, people whose favorite director is Vivek Agnihotri should not expect a Schindler's List. And we must also know that a film as stark as Schindler's List also got a lot of brickbats from conservative Jews who thought that, you know, a film as stark as Schindler's List, I've not seen anything as stark as that film, has also watered down the story of Jews.
But also, I think it begs the question that so it's a great thing that for the first time, a story of two people has been placed within a community that has suffered violence and the most brutal kind of violence that one could imagine. You have placed that story at the backdrop of their story.
Right.
So that's fine. But I think it begs the question, I mean, you know, literature, cinema, the arts, the fine arts, performing arts, have all played their own role in the telling of conflict and in the healing process of conflict. So I would like to ask you that, do you feel the people who are attacking the movie today actually don't seek any closure?
I'm saying don't seek any closure. But at least, you know, there should be some forward movement in the story. We have held on to this bitterness for 30 years. There are reasons to it. The reasons are that, you know, we did not get any semblance of justice. Even 30 years later, our murderers who have confessed on national television that they were responsible for the people like Bitta Karate, who were responsible for the killing of more than 20 Kashmiri Pandits. They are roaming free, you know, they are in jail for other reasons, etc., etc. So there's a lot of bitterness. I'm the one who has never, you know, who has been consistent about.
You've been extremely forthright and critical about who did what.
Wherever I get a chance, you know, if people call me to Shaheen Bagh tomorrow and ask me to narrate my story, I will. Tomorrow, if Jamaat-e-Islami wants me to narrate my story, I'll tell that exactly as I would on a RSS munch.
Right.
So there is absolutely no difference to me. But, you know, at least there should, now 30 years later, we're talking about 30 years, 3 decades have passed. The original generation who moved on from Kashmir, most of them are dead. So we must give peace a chance. This film is a chance. Vinod keeps on saying that from this film, because we have shown a certain empathy towards all characters, we have showed villains, we have also showed this dignity. At least now, through this film, there should be some acknowledgement of our pain. But that acknowledgement will only feel when the other side does not feel that we have villainized them. We have been unfair to them. That is not what we have been. And that is why today, you see, I mean, I am so encouraged and I'm so happy that young Kashmiri Muslims are approaching me on Twitter, on Facebook, they're sending me direct messages and they're saying, look, we were not there in 1990. Our parents told us stories, but they were not enough. Today, we're really trying to understand what happened to you guys in 1990, and we are sorry. I think for me, that is singularly the biggest victory of this film. And I'm extremely proud of that.
So, I just want to ask you, I mean, just on that point a little more, you know, your book is your history.
Right.
It's the way you remember it, and it's a memoir. You compare it to, say, for example, what Basharat Peer wrote in Curfew Night, his history, his memoir.
Yes.
For an outsider like me, what we do is we read both versions and we try and see what's common.
That's the way it should be.
Right? And also, you know, the criticisms or the analyses that take place around us is that this is a story that was neglected. Maybe it was not given enough prominence. It was reported but not given enough prominence. There were also other things happening in the country, in the world at the same time, and we're all aware of 89, 90 being a turbulent time globally, right? Not any justification, but I think the question is, in the years since then, there have been so many other brutalities in Kashmir as well against the population that stays over there, for example, or the fact that local populations have continued to be the targets of militants who have been fired by religion or fueled by across the border or whatever have you. So the victims have changed. The conflict remains the same, but the victims have changed. And in the nature of the news business, yesterday's victim sometimes is forgotten because today's victim has taken over.
That's precisely the problem. I think you said it all. The problem with the Kashmiri Pandit story was that the main action, as we understand it journalistically, kept on happening in Kashmir Valley. It was a place where there was a conflict between the Indian security forces and armored groups. It had the romanticism of gun, which of course attracts media and international media. There's a story to be told.
That's right.
Which according to them is more important than a handful of people who left. Now one would have assumed that at least Indian editors of those times would have the sensitivity to go there. Of course, there's an important story there, and all of us should go there. But at least assign, maybe not 100%, but maybe a 50%, some sort of coverage from the camps to tell their stories.
In fact, just to interrupt you, in the movie there is a scene where the family, Shiv and Shanti's family, are sitting in front of the television and watching, trying to wait for the news of what's happened around them, and they say, Doordarshan has just shown a minute.
Imagine our crisis in before Exodus, Maya. This is the time there's no WhatsApp, there's no social media, there is no mobile phone.
And the landlines are not working in the movie either.
There's hardly any landline density in any case, even if they're working. So we have absolutely no idea what is happening in South Kashmir. I live in Srinagar city. I have no idea what is happening in Anantnag or Baramulla, to my own cousins, to my own extended family. Doordarshan is as insipid as is shown in the film. The only glimpses of violence you get here and there is on BBC Urdu. We're glued onto it in the evening. People come and they tell us that, Falana Jaga, this person has died, this person has died. But the original magnitude of what happened to us is only evident to us once we leave. And we reach this temple compound in the heart of Jammu city called Gitabaun, where we see the people and we meet each other. Because it's a crisis where a brother has not been able to tell his brother that he's leaving, or a colleague has not been able to tell, friends have parted. So we do not know what has happened, and that's exactly how it is shown in the film. When Shanti realizes that her own best friend, who she's not been able to be in touch in Kashmir, has been killed. And then you later realize how she's killed. So all this was happening. So sometimes I go on to see the archives of 1989, 90. There's a odd story here in Times of India or India Today. But it's very, very little. It's just a one-column news somewhere. It talks. Some junior reporter has gone to a small camp in Mumbai, and he or she has talked to a few Kashmiri Pandits.
So Rahul, I just want to ask you, because this is a very personal thing for you. But as an outsider, when I listen to you say this, I can say that every member of a community, whatever the community may be, that has suffered at the hands of this kind of conflict, at some point feels that their story has not been told enough. And so is that a common thread? And is that because it's so personal and you're too close to it? Or if you were outside the community, would you see it the same way today?
I think I would. I say this purely on the basis of evidence I've seen on ground. I can keep on saying. In 1984, for example, in the anti-Sikh pogrom, for example, you see the evidence on newsprint. Let's forget everything. Let's forget the idea of justice, etc. It's like I was telling...
Just the events as they happen.
Like I was telling your colleague Venu, we had a conversation. It's very difficult to get justice in this country in any case.
In any case.
In any case.
For anyone.
For anyone.
Right.
But in our case especially, it was much, much starker than all other tragedies. Even today, you hear any human rights wala or civil rights liberty wala speak about the events as they proceeded in this country. So he or she will say 1984, 1992, 93, 2002. 90, it's just...
1990 doesn't exist.
1990 doesn't exist. This hurts us. So you say 1984, you make a pause and say 1990. Even if fleetingly...
And then move on to 92 and 93.
Fair enough. 92, 93, 2002, whatever you want to talk about. Fair enough. We're not judges of that.
But don't ignore this.
But just ignore this. And this is exactly because you have ignored this, we are in a state which we are in today.
Do you think that there needs to be some kind of, you say acknowledgement that, and these are what young Kashmiri Muslims are telling you on social media, but by the same token from the Pandit community as well. And I'm asking you because in the movie there are small glimpses of this, you know, where in the case of the protagonist's family, it is the Muslim neighbor who comes to them with a taxi in the middle of the night and says, you need to be safe, just go, go, go. I mean, you know, they don't need to do that. They can let you. So there were stories of where communities actually were friends. They worked together, they lived together. They may not have married into each other's communities or whatever it is, but there was a camaraderie. There was a sense that we all, because we're ethnically, linguistically the same, this is our space, yours and mine. And just as in 1984, you hear stories of how Delhi families came to the rescue of so many Sikhs who were running from the mob, that there were stories like that in Kashmir, and those have also got lost somewhere.
So two things. Let's compare Kashmir to Kashmir. So 1947, for example, when the tribesman attack happened, Gandhiji said that point in time that the only place where he sees a ray of light is Kashmir. You know, he said that in the backdrop of partition. Of course, in 1947 also there were few Pandit families who did not see that light because, you know, there was communalism in those days. But mota on a larger scale, there was a sense of camaraderie which you keep on talking about. There were thick bonds between Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Hindus. That is how civil militias were formed under national conference when they said, "Hamlawar o khabardar, hum Kashmiri hai tayar." So there was no Kashmiri Muslim or Kashmiri Hindu. So Kashmiri hum tayar hai. There's a case of Maqbool Sherwani, who is not only Kashmir's hero but India's hero, who misled the tribesmen, because of which they did not reach their Srinagar airport on time. So there are a lot of heroic details in those days. But unfortunately, by the time you reach 1990, the cases like we say in the film, those cases where neighbors saved us or neighbors did something for us were far and few.
And yet you chose to highlight them in the script.
Choose to highlight them because it's important to say these stories.
I mean, I think it's a good thing that you did.
Because it happened to me on my own. You know, the character of Latif Lone is taken from my own story.
I know.
So when my mother got stuck in a crossfire, and by the time Latif was already a militant, mind you, and he got killed a few months later, he's the one who saved my mother in that sense. So in that sense, I also wanted to acknowledge that. So I also wanted to acknowledge that, you know, I may have a little empathy still, knowing that what trajectory Latif's life has taken. He may have his personal reasons or not, but I can still empathize with a character like him. When Latif dies, when the real Latif dies, my mother was crying for 2 days because we're so close to his family. But yet, we cannot forgive those who did not fire a bullet at us, but were looking for an opportunity to usurp our houses.
Yeah, you show that as well.
The example of Haji Sahib in the film. So there is clarity. But again, so, you know, some law must happen. We have no reason to say sorry to them because we're not done anything to them. But there should be some empathy from the side of Kashmiri Pandits that the ordinary...
Also because in the years since the Pandits have left, I mean, there's been a different trajectory completely for the valley.
So the ordinary Kashmiris, you know, there should be some empathy for the ordinary Kashmiris who got stuck in Kashmir because of different reasons. They also got killed. They also faced human rights violations. And on the other side, the only thing we expect from ordinary Kashmiris, it cannot happen from Hurriyat. We do not want that from Hurriyat or from the mainstream political leadership. I want that acknowledged from my neighbor, for example, that look, we did not fire a bullet at you. We're not a part of that mob who came and attacked your house. But we stayed silent in 1990. We did not do enough
to protect
because in 1990 there were a handful of terrorists. If the majority of ordinary Kashmiri Muslims had come out and said, this is not done, we will not allow this to happen, Not only the killing of Kashmiri Muslims, but all Kashmiri Hindus, but also the killing of Kashmiri Muslims. Many Kashmiri Muslims also got killed. So we will not allow this to happen. If it had become a mass movement.
So Rahul, that brings me to this whole idea, and for those of us who are not only journalists but deeply involved in sort of peace and conflict studies and things like that, the idea of truth and reconciliation, to set up commissions, to have communities talk to each other across the table. When you see the kind of backlash your film got, and you personally have faced from your own community, do you think the Kashmiri Pandit community is open to a truth and reconciliation commission? Do you think there is scope for that in the current times that we live in India?
There's a lot of bitterness, like I said. A lot of bitterness also stems from the fact that a majority of the majority community in Kashmir is in absolute denial about the circumstances that led to our exodus. Even in private conversations, you keep on hearing this. Yaar, aapko to Jagmohan ne nikal diya. So this is like it's as insulting as a Nazi salute to us, really. So of course, there's bitterness from the other side, and many have become extremists from other side also. But this reconciliation cannot happen at the government level. Government may do whatever they want to do at their own level.
Or as you said, at the political level.
At the political level. It will only happen when there's a people-to-people contact.
So how do you do that?
People contact will happen first, like I was hoping that this film will do to Kashmir what Lage Raho Munna Bhai did to the idea of Gandhiji. That at least, these trickles which I'm receiving in my social media, or Vinod is receiving, or a few others are receiving, should become a mass movement now. That people come out, young, modern Kashmiris come out and say, boss,
so I'm going to ask
we're not responsible for this.
I'm going to ask you a tricky question.
But let's talk.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a tricky question as far as that's concerned now, which is that if it is about communities and saying, come out, let's talk, and I'm a firm believer that movies, even if they in a limited way touch upon a theme, they open up something in the viewer or the reader's mind, movies, literature, whatever have you. In the last 6-7 months, I think now it's been since the dilution of Article 370 on August 5th. Do you think that this idea that communities can come together and this acknowledgement that you're seeking for something that happened 30 years ago, do you think that the last 6 months have impacted the possibility of that? And positively, negatively, whatever?
It's a both yes and no. I'll tell you why. I'll explain myself. If you remember the day the article was abrogated, August 5, the first visuals all television channel showed was some small group of Kashmiri Pandits somewhere on the outskirts of Delhi distributing sweets. Now this is typical of TV in this country. Somehow this message was sent across as if we are, the community as a whole is seeking revenge. कि आपका 370 हट गया, अब आपको आर्मी मारेगी, police मारेगी. That's all bunkum. We must understand that beyond the bitterness of social media and what we say to each other on television, person-to-person relationships are still intact among Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. If you go to Jammu today, there's marriage season on, you will not see a single marriage in Jammu or Delhi where there's not a Kashmiri Muslim singing troupe which is not singing, and their own friends from Kashmir Valley have not come. There are so many Kashmiri Hindus, thousands of them, who visit Kashmir Valley every season, and some of them end up staying at their friends' houses. So the answer is yes. The imagery of it would say that when Kashmiri Muslims see these visuals in Kashmir, obviously it will make them angry. But having said that, there's still scope. There's a lot of scope. But that scope will only happen at people-to-people level when we ignore the poison on social media, when we ignore the poison on television channels.
What about the weaponization of this kind of pain and grievance by political parties?
The weaponization has happened both sides. You have weaponized this by talking too much about it. You have weaponized this by not speaking at all about this. I think both are wrong, and both of them should come to an end now.
So, just to come to what's happening in Kashmir today, you've been a reporter on the ground after this August 5th, 2019. I remember reading your reports in the early days. what do you think about what's happening there today? I mean, the prolonged detentions, the repeated, I mean, they may have opened internet in some places, but the repeated shutdowns for one reason or another. The fact that there seems to be a decision that was taken, but nothing else since then. I mean, what is happening?
I think a decision was taken. And after that, what we see is a little ambiguity in terms of what we see today.
I'd say a lot.
A lot of ambiguity. I think it does not serve any purpose now that you're detaining the entire political leadership, especially those who have been elected democratically
and have been part of central governments,
who've been part of the central government. Your own government has stomped on them, the previous governments.
That's right.
As the representatives of modern secular India, as Kashmiris who are part of the larger democratic India. And I hope the government takes a decision on that. And we know from our experience that the internet shutdown may have been a necessity in August 5, but it has gone on for too long now. Beyond a point when if things have to happen, there's no way you can avoid them. And it also is a bad reflection on your own democratic values that you've led a population of so many people. You have denied them access to internet.
Yes, I mean in the world we talk about digital rights as human rights.
In today's, yes, it's roti, kapda, makan and internet. So I think the government should take those decisions now, and I hope they take it in immediate future.
And also in terms of political movement, I mean, is there an end game in sight about what they foresee? What is your assessment of that? Secondly, how can it be done without speaking to the community? Because it's almost as though everyone's accusing everyone of being in echo chambers nowadays, but the government seems to be in its own echo chamber as far as Kashmir is concerned. So it's not just about dealing with the sort of internet and public life and the ease of living for ordinary Kashmiris. It's about an end game politically as well. Is there one?
I can't see it. I can't see it personally. As a Kashmiri watcher, I do not know what the end game is. But I'm only hoping, as a Kashmiri, as a journalist, that whatever the end game is, it ends the schizophrenia which New Delhi has encouraged in Kashmir for the past 70 years, where you have encouraged the whole set of mainstream political leaders to speak in one language in New Delhi and speak in another language in Kashmir. I think the time for that has come to an end, and I think whatever political process begins in Kashmir in near future, and I hope it begins in near future, it is not a reflection or a repeat of the same process.
Do you think that the central government feels they can get away with this kind of ambiguity and lack of movement on Kashmir because from the BJP's own core support base, which has also weaponized the Pandit story and the exodus, you see a kind of polarization in society which has set in. We're seeing it manifest in the Shaheen Bagh protests, where the Indian Muslim overall is feeling a little beleaguered. We're seeing it weaponized by political leaders who make all kinds of slogans during election campaigns. This will be an India versus Pakistan match, things like that. Where do you see all this, Rahul?
I think some of it is also done because there's a huge approval.
Does that worry you?
It is worrying. You see I've said this in the past also. I was covering elections in Bihar in 2019 last year, and I felt very clearly that the Pulwama, today is the anniversary of Pulwama suicide attack.
That's right.
It became a game changer in elections, where every single person I met in Bihar was talking about Pulwama, because then Kashmir did not remain a conflict which is somewhere happening.
It came home to you.
It came home. There were processions, impromptu processions in places like Samastipur, etc. So there is also this impression that there is also this anger Pratap Bhanu Mehta calls it the Kashmirization of India. There's also this anger among the Indian masses now that enough is enough. What are you doing in Kashmir? So there's an approval for the abrogation of Article 370. But I think after a point in time, people should also understand that what you were done in terms of August 5, it's done. But now at least, there should be some forward movement.
Also
because you cannot keep a population,
under lockdown,
under siege, yes.
But also I think the idea that political parties hope to weaponize or like to weaponize is, the perception that every Kashmiri Muslim is anti-India, and the perception that it's actually not the Kashmiri Muslim but the Muslim is, and so therefore you're kind of conflating. I'm not saying this is being done consciously or in a detailed way, but you're talking about news television and news debates all the time, but this idea that you are going on TV every day by identifying one community versus another, one kind of religion versus another, one ideology versus another, and trying to slot everybody in these binaries. It's to the point of being a little dangerous now.
Whenever I'm in Kashmir and, a friend or a colleague or anyone or an acquaintance tells me, in summers it will begin, when people would like to go to Kashmir Valley, they'll say, kya kare? Should we go or not? The first advice I offer them is switch off your television channel.
Yeah.
Please switch off your television channel, because it is not a reflection of what is happening in Kashmir. It is not a reflection on a majority of Kashmiris. There might be an aberration here and there. It is leading to such a dangerous polarization, such a dangerous stereotyping in this country, and that's why you see these
outside Kashmir.
Outside. I'm talking about outside Kashmir, which is totally unjust and totally unfair. And I say this with full responsibility that it will have long-term repercussions in this country, which as a country we should avoid, because we simply cannot afford that.
Right, and you're absolutely right. We can't afford that. So what is the way out?
The way out is to have dialogue. The way out is to begin these smaller conversations. That is exactly why we made this film, because it's very easy. It was very easy for us to show the gore and violence in this story. Of course, I'll keep on talking about it, but at some point in time, we need to pause and think where we are going. And from our past experiences, we know that conversations can work like magic sometimes. When people void their hearts of this bitterness, this poisons, miracles happen. And I'm hoping that this film, if not an immediate, huge response, but at least, in small groups, in small vicinities, in offices, in homes, in Delhi, in Mumbai, where Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Pandits, not only Kashmiri Muslims, Kashmiri Pandits, people in general who do not know about this tragedy or who have had other tragedies in their life, get inspired by it and say, look, dignity, empathy, love is the only emotion, is the only sentiment which will make us sail through. And let us put an end to all this bitterness, and let's move forward.
So I think the need for closure, and again we come back to the idea of truth and reconciliation,
and
justice, and maybe Shikara is sort of one step in that direction, irrespective of what the trolls may or may not say.
Fingers crossed.
Rahul Pandita, thanks so much for speaking to us at The Wire.
Thank you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.